Howdy folks, it's me just checking in here since we, because of all this crazy scheduling at the end of the term here, have lost all this FaceTime. I know, I'm sad too. But I thought I would just do a little check-in here to sort of keep people engaged a little bit and, you know, just give you a few updates on what's going on as far as our class goes. So this is the week of Monday the 22nd and Wednesday the 24th. So we've missed both of those classes again due to my involvement with the search committee that's doing looking for a new hire in the philosophy religion department. I'm the outside person as part of that committee, so it's obviously not my area, but I end up having to participate now that we're at the final end of it. They invite the candidates to campus, and it's a full-day affair. They do a tour, interview with the search committee, they do a teaching demo that I have to be at, and just all this other stuff. So there are things that I can't get out of, and I can't really, I have limited, if any, flexibility. So there we have it. As you'll notice here, I've posted another announcement for the same reason. My involvement with the search committee. I now have to cancel our class on the 29th, which is a Monday, so we'll have gone, a week and a half without any kind of face-to-face time. I guess the good news is that, of course, we've had our online stuff that at least keeps you kind of involved, and we can still progress through the material in part that we want to get through. And to be honest, one of the offers they make, because I have to miss these classes, is that I could get a sub, but, they might come in and show video clips, but I can put that into Blackboard here, which is what I've done for the next unit, where we're looking at a series of versions of the famous to be or not to be speech. So it made more sense to me to allow you guys the flexibility to not have to come to class for 50 minutes and sit and watch all that together, where we couldn't really do much beyond that in terms of interaction or whatever. We'll certainly pick that up on Wednesday when we finally see each other again, which is going to be, what date would that be? Is that May? Yeah, May 1st. Anyway, such is the way of things. Whatever. So, just to keep you on track then, and I'm just in our course here. We are right now in the week, or the unit. We've just come out of the illustrating a short story, which people did a really great job with, even though the technical side was so clunky with having to use the wiki the way we did. I think it looks great. And you can see what everybody else did, which was sort of the point, not to just build them so that only you could see them. But anyway, we now are in the Hamlet discussion that I talked very briefly about at the tail end of our last face-to-face meeting, which was again very rushed for all of these scheduling reasons. So hopefully you're making your way through Hamlet. You'll notice that, as I pointed out, part of this unit is the Hamlet synopsis, which is a great place to start. I am not against figuring out the basic plot or getting the plot beforehand before diving in. And again, as I mentioned in class, Hamlet is obviously a play that you could spend weeks on, probably an entire course on, given the complexity of all of the themes going on, its existence in various forms, all the movie versions and play versions, just its whole history, right? So we get really just a taste of it, which is, there's a downside to that, but the good news for you is that you're not having to read for every little nuance of language and meaning and all that stuff. You really are just reading for the experience of basically what happens and what are some of the overarching themes. And the one that I talked about in class, again, very briefly, and this radical gear shift from what we were doing in order to at least squeeze something in there, was that really key theme of identity. And the way to think about that or remember it is just remember the very first line of the play, who's there. It's a sort of trivial throwaway line in some ways because it's just one guard asking literally who is there. But it introduces this huge theme that will really develop and sort of change throughout the course of the play. And it's really the fundamental question that Hamlet himself deals with. This difference between playing a part and actually being something. In fact, you'll probably notice that his first major speech, after he says a couple of other single lines, his first major speech is to the queen, who says basically that his father's died, and he's grieved appropriately, but now it's kind of time to like get over it. So she doesn't come across as the most sympathetic of characters immediately, although if she doesn't know any of what's happened as far as Claudius and this whole thing, maybe we can understand this. I don't know. She's a very complicated character. So anyway, her first words to Hamlet are, basically like, well, you've done a good job of grieving, but can we be happy now? Let's, lift thine eyes off the dust and cast thy nighted color off. In other words, stop wearing black. It's like getting everyone down. And of course, he says to her accusation that things seem a little inappropriate here, or everything about you on the surface, you're crying, you're wearing black, you're moping around, it seems that you're really distraught. And his response is really interesting because, again, it goes to this central idea of identity. He says that any person can seem to be something. You can put the clothing on, you can act a certain way outwardly, you can say certain things to get people to believe stuff. But in his case, he really is this distraught. So again, right off the bat, we have the introduction of this important theme, and really it sort of elaborates that identity theme, the difference between seeming to be something and actually being something. And you'll remember that, again, in one of the next variations of this, he finally meets the ghost, and the ghost tells Hamlet what happened to him, that Claudius poured poison into his ear in the garden and then married the queen, Hamlet's mother, and now the ghost charges Hamlet to avenge the death, right? Avenge his death. And Hamlet, or anybody else in the play, still isn't convinced that the ghost is in fact old Hamlet. There's still some debate about that. But anyway, Hamlet's plan then, and I've never totally understood this, is to act crazy, right? To seem mad. And that way, even though he's secretly trying to figure out whether Claudius is in fact guilty and then exact revenge, if he is, he's going to seem off balance so that nobody really pays him that much attention. If anything, it sort of draws attention to him, so maybe the plan isn't that great. But you can see that, again, fundamentally throughout the play are these questions of identity, of seeming to be one thing while you're actually another. And then I think what finally sort of breaks for Hamlet, and what makes the play so contemporary or so accessible, despite the language difference and the falseness of it in some ways, what still speaks to us, I think, is that central kind of dilemma. Once you reach the point where if you can seem to be anything, then is it all just seeming? Like, what is our quote-unquote true self? And of all the characters who offer advice in the play or speak important lines, it's Polonius, who, despite being kind of a fool in some ways, he actually tells his son Laertes, he gives advice to Laertes before Laertes heads back off to France. He said, "To thine own self be true," which is, again, one of those like nuggets in the play that it seems simple enough, like just be yourself or do what let your conscience be your guide. But if, to follow that other line in the play, everything is just seeming, and what's the difference between actually being something and acting something, then how can you be true to yourself if that self is a sort of falsehood, or it's always a play, it's always a pretending? And so much of the play then, and why it's become famous in terms of it being very different during its time period, is that it presents this hero, quote unquote, in Hamlet, who, instead of being the traditional hero who finds something out and then acts on it immediately, and it's this very like action-packed kind of epic thing, we have a very long play in which really not a lot happens. Mostly it's about deferred action, because ultimately what Hamlet needs is what he believes is like accurate, absolute proof. The truth is what he needs before he can then take action to avenge his father's death. And so again, you can see how that relates to, if everything is seeming and not actual, then how do we ever get like proof? How do we ever get something substantial that we can trust, that we can then act on? So Hamlet almost becomes paralyzed. He's unable to act. Consciously or unconsciously, he's always deferring action until some later date, precisely because he's grappling with this dilemma that, like I said, is very contemporary, it's very modern. What are we, or who are we? How do we present ourselves in some true fashion that's not just acting, or just like responding to conditions around us, that isn't like being part of a dramatic event rather than some true self. And of course the play doesn't resolve this. It doesn't say, oh, this is how to do it, or this is what's accurate, or this is the solution. It really leaves it open for us to work with, which is certainly one of the frustrating parts of the play. It doesn't provide you with answers necessarily. But again, we don't do like an exam on it. I'll never ask you, like, what's the solution in Hamlet? So we don't have to read for that. We can read to appreciate those open-ended questions that it presents, and the fact that it doesn't resolve it for us. Okay, well, as you can see, I could go on, and this is precisely why I don't think having you guys come into class for 50 minutes without me being there for us to like exchange these ideas, it doesn't do much good. So April 29th then is canceled. Sorry. We're back in class on Wednesday, May 1st then, which will actually be our last class meeting before our final exam, which I'll talk about in class, and I've posted some information here, so it's not going to come totally out of the blue for you. If you have questions or concerns, because we haven't had this face-to-face time for a while, be sure to be in touch with me. I'm running out of YouTube time here, I can see. Keep up with, obviously, the work for this week, the casting of Hamlet, and if you were to produce your own play version of it. And then for next week, just make sure, that Monday that we missed, just make sure that you've watched the to be or not to be versions in the unit. And then we'll spend some time on Wednesday talking about what that speech actually means. It's one of the most famous but most often misinterpreted in the whole literary tradition. And then, of course, we'll attend to final exam and try to wrap things up a little bit. It's been an odd, at best, end to our semester, but we'll get back on track just in time for summer, I hope. All right, I'll talk to you everybody soon.